Okay, so today via Zoom, I'm joined with Adria Moses, and she's a trauma-informed yoga instructor that is using her virtual platform right now to help people through and regulate people and give people stress relief during this COVID crisis. Thank you so much for being with us today, Adria.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. I have been dying to talk about this in like a healthy, constructive way, because it's been the first 2 weeks were just straight like chaos. I think we could all agree.
Absolutely. In total agreement. So
Yeah.
I just want to give you space to kind of introduce yourself and tell us, in your constructive way, like who you are, what you're offering during this time, your interests, passions.
Yeah. So my name is Adria. I am based out of Detroit, Michigan. I am a trauma-informed yoga instructor and mindfulness facilitator. I've been teaching yoga for almost 4 years now, and I am really passionate about facilitating people's healing.
Mhm.
Basically, creating safe spaces for people to explore whatever that means to them. We know that healing is not linear. We know that yoga isn't for everybody. We know these things. So my passion is just to hold safe space for people. Um, right now, as we know, we're in a very large crisis, a global pandemic. This coronavirus has really stopped the world. And before the studio, my studio closed down, before like Michigan got put on lockdown, I had made the decision to stop teaching anyways because I just didn't feel comfortable. When I made that decision, I didn't know I was gonna, you know, virtually offer anything.
Mhm.
I just knew like the first step was like, what is my moral responsibility in this?
Mhm.
Stop teaching, stop, gathering, more than 10 people, all
Mhm.
the things. And that evening, I just kind of was like, okay, well, let me pivot. If they can't see me physically, they need to see me in some way because this shit, excuse my language, is about to hit the fan. And I said this to my friend yesterday who I was having a conversation with, was like, if people are coming to our classes when things are relatively okay in the world,
Mhm.
I imagine that they need it now more than ever.
Mhm.
So I just basically transitioned to IG Live. That's where I teach predominantly. And I'm offering meditation, I'm offering yoga, prenatal yoga, Pilates, just different modalities for people to tap into.
Mhm. Absolutely, and that's insightful. And your practices, your meditations are beautiful for anybody that wants to check them out. They'll be enriched by your offerings. And I think it's so interesting that even when you had the opportunity to still teach, you decided, like you said, to pivot. And I wonder if your insight as somebody who has dealt with chronic illness, I know you have the podcast Chronic Hustle, if you just were more in tune with health and how important that was for people. Can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, there was one weekend basically before. So basically, how Michigan transitioned was like there was one week where we like all started to not all of us, but we started to self distance, and then we got locked down.
Mhm.
So I was just reading the news, and I was like out like a Friday, a Saturday, I was out. But Saturday night, I went home and I started reading the news and I started to digest the numbers and I started to get a fundamental understanding of what was going on. And the next day, I was just like, yeah, for my health mostly, and for the health of others. And so, as far as insight and introspection into that, I definitely think having a chronic illness put me on higher alert
Mhm.
for what was actually occurring because I felt like I'm already high risk regularly. And
Mhm.
the way that this thing is spreading, it just doesn't seem, and just like how one person can spread it to 2 people or like however it works. It's just like, it really kind of shook me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, having a chronic illness gives you a lens to say that, like, you see the risks differently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because, having an autoimmune disease, I'm constantly weary of if people have a cold, if people have like the flu, the flu is getting brought up a lot. It's like, I'm weary if someone has the flu. So, because that could affect my health. And so that definitely, I think it made my antennas come up a little bit
Mm-hmm.
faster.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think in a way it's creating like healthy boundaries, right? Because to take care
Yeah.
of people, you have to take care of yourself. So in order to offer certain things to other people and have the energy of overflow, like you have to have boundaries for yourself.
Absolutely. And to piggyback off of that is just to say, like, one thing that really came up in me a lot, I'm constantly preaching about health is wealth. And I'm constantly preaching about how if you don't have your health, you have nothing. So what weighed really heavy on me was, who am I to continue to teach,
Mm.
knowing I can see where this is going? Like, it's that first week before lockdown, like, we all knew what was happening, right? Like, we're seeing what happened in other countries. Like, who am I to continue to show up? I'm not being who I say I am. So
Right.
that was an integrity part played a really big role, I think, as well.
I think that's beautiful, though. I'm so glad that you honor that for yourself and then for other people. In a lot of ways, that ripple effect that we all have right now, like how powerful that is, like we have to take that into consideration
Yeah.
and use that for advantage for everybody else. So you have this um, you have this knowledge about trauma because you're trauma informed, and anybody that knows what people have to go through to be a trauma-informed yoga instructor knows that there's so much material that goes into that and learning. So I want to ask you what you're seeing in this. I know you had this post, which I loved it. You were like, fuck productivity. And I just want you to talk to how productivity can actually be a trauma response at times that's for distraction.
Yeah. So right now it's crazy. Like, when all of this really hit, it was interesting to watch, like, my peers, people close to me that I know. It
Mhm.
was interesting to watch how they all reacted. And I started to realize, like, so many of my peers, like, are accustomed to chaos. They come from, really rough parts of Detroit. Even if they've made it out and they're doing relatively well right now, a lot of them, like, weren't self quarantining. And I found that to be, it's like they knew what the threat was, but something wasn't registering. And then I saw other people with whom very easily you could say, come from like silver spoon and have had things, relatively even for them. When
Mhm.
it happened, their level of being productive, what they were promoting was like, now's the time. Like, the first week after we get told that we can't leave our houses, that, people are not going to be able to feed their families. Like, we're losing people globally. This is a global trauma. That's what makes it unique, is that we typically are undergoing trauma within our own cipher, within our own bubble. My trauma is my own. You have your own trauma. No one really sees it or knows about it unless you talk about it. Now we're literally enduring something all together. And productivity is a very interesting trauma response because it's an avoidant. It's to avoid, right? Some people drink and do drugs to cope. Other people have no response, right? They keep putting themselves at risk. That's how like traumatized they've been. Or for me, I was very triggered where, like, I was having a lot of panic attacks the first week. Well, not a lot, but a good amount the first week.
Mhm.
So, when we talk about productivity, I found it so interesting when people were coming right out the gate, because those same people, like a week later, were they, claiming that they were bored, or claiming, because God forbid, like slowing down happens, but also trauma is such a compounded aspect that you don't actually feel it until you slow down, until you have to pause. And that's why a lot of people don't pause, is because things start to come up. They don't know that it's trauma. They don't know that it's a response. So that, what do? They do the things that would help them avoid feeling it. And so it's been very interesting to observe. And like I told my friend last night, I just said, we're in a medical pandemic right now. Like, we're having a medical crisis. Next, I do believe like we will have a mental health crisis, a mental health pandemic, because isolation can be triggering for people. And then I know that you, more than anyone, can feel how impactful mothers not being able to have a birthing partner in the room, or not being able to make contact with baby right away because COVID test has to come back, negative, or, all of these things. It's not just death. It's not just we can't leave our houses. This is trauma after trauma after trauma. So we're losing people, yes, but we're also having babies being born into this, and they will experience trauma. And so it's very layered and very fragile. And we have, like, in our space, we're going to have a lot of work to do when this is over, because there's going to be, a lot of PTSD coming out of this.
Absolutely.
People going to the hospital and then getting turned away because they're not as sick as they should be. Those are all these little instances that people kind of, they brush over. That is the trauma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you bring up that it's so compounded, like, actually, just because of a mom, in general, if you're pregnant, feeling that and not being able to regulate your nervous system.
Oh, right.
And that passes down to how this developing nervous system actually comes to, so it's just, it really is so compounded. And I think what you said, like this mental health kind of pandemic that we're kind of seeing start, but it's going to continue because there's people that aren't even, they don't even know how to actually acknowledge their anxiety because they've never felt anxiety like this. There's people that are like, hold on, I didn't have an anxiety attack, or I had never experienced this before. Because like you said, it's nobody's left untouched, right? This is global. So like you said, I mean, there's a lot of socialistic behavior right now. People want to help other people because they know what they're going through. And I think like if we can carry that insight over in some way, it will be beautiful, because we understand people are going through trauma and it's very real for them.
Yes.
Even after this, after some of the smoke clears.
Oh, yeah, that's when it's really going to be like, nothing will ever be the same after this.
Absolutely. And just coming to terms with that, I think, for people has been really hard. So like you said, like trauma response, denial, just pushing through, pushing forward, or coming straight out the gate like fire. You're on Duolingo, you're going to learn 3 languages.
Yeah, and it's like, that's literally just to avoid. And like, I just think about people that were struggling mentally before this happened. Right. Now you're quarantined. Okay, shit. Like, maybe you lost your job. Now you can't pay for therapy. Like, I think about all these different layers, and I think about how many people don't have the tools to cope.
Right.
That is scary, and it sucks because we've prioritized, unfortunately in America, we've prioritized the most vain of things and claimed that the mind was crazy if it wasn't, going along with the status quo. Now there's no rules. Now there's no status quo.
Dismantled.
And we're going to see that mental health, because it was trending last year. Mental health is going to come to the forefront in a really big way. especially for our nurses, for our doctors, like ensuring that they're okay. Like every time we observe trauma, we need to be thinking about it as if it was war, because people tend to be able to digest, a soldier coming back from war. That is what's occurring right now.
Right. Absolutely. There's
It
people on the front lines fighting
yes,
against this,
yes,
which actually is less controllable than most everything else that we've seen, So,
yes,
and productivity is like the socially acceptable way of
right.
dealing with,
Yeah, 'cause
you know,
God forbid,
anything.
yeah, because God forbid you're depressed and you sleep for 3 days. Or God forbid you admit, and I read this online, like you may feel more tired even though you're less productive. And
Mhm.
that's a trauma response. Your body is literally being impacted, right? Because people think, well, they have everything that they need, and you're blessed. That's great, but you're still incurring trauma. So you might feel more tired throughout the day. You might need a couple naps. And guess what? If it was your child feeling this way, if your child was scared, if your child had anxiety, if your child was more tired than normal, what would you do? You would help your child. You would do
Absolutely.
the things, you would give your child what they needed, not go be productive.
I love that. Like
Go
treat yourself.
build, go build. So, yeah. Some
Right.
of us were raised that way though, right? When we were
Mhm.
tired, we were called lazy.
Mhm.
Right. So it's so it's so layered, and it does affect us intersectionally in different ways. The pandemic affects people of color in a larger way. It affects women in a lot. We know this.
Mhm.
It affects them in a different way, not in a larger way or in a way that is, more than the other, but we're definitely being affected differently.
Differently.
So it's been, I've been observing and just making sure that I'm processing and
Mhm.
making sure that I'm coping and making sure that I'm ready for when we come back out and to be ready to help people.
Mhm. That's so beautiful. So you said like you're constantly obviously processing even in giving these gifts to other people, really, because they're gifts. I mean, virtual offerings are gifts, and in a lot of ways, just you talk about giving people a sense of peace just by creating the space, and really that helps with gaining energy. Like you were saying, energy is being taken because of the trauma of this happening, but when you gain a sense of perspective and peace in your mind, then it fills you up again.
It
so
does. You
so
should.
yeah, so you're offering all of these things. So how do you process through your own responses? And like you said, you had a couple of times of feeling panic. So how do you process that for other people?
Yeah. So I have been processing trauma at a rate that a lot of people don't have to typically,
Mhm.
just because of the things that I've been through. So a lot of people, know me for my scar, and and they know a little bit of the story, but a lot of what is happening right now, I've been here before, different circumstances, but very similar, you know, um, very similar in this in a sense. So like when I had my emergency surgery, I was on life support. I
Mhm.
was hospitalized for a total of 60 days. I went home. I really couldn't leave the house. I couldn't work. I had no income.
Wow.
Very similar circumstances, actually. And I mean, I didn't live in a beautiful home like I do right now. So I'm very blessed. And gratitude is driving the hell out of me right now, but I process in really real ways. So the first panic attack I had, I knew that it was coming because I found myself being so I have a more of a obsessive behaviors, meaning that when all the numbers like came out for COVID, I was reading them every morning, every night,
Mhm.
almost obsessively. Like I needed to read them to for what?
Mhm.
All they were doing was giving me anxiety. That's all that they were doing.
Right.
So the first, like, I did that for like 4 days. And I'm being honest because I'm a human being.
I love
Like,
this.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a human being. So for the first 4 days, I did that. And the fourth day, in the evening, I was reading about ventilators. I was on a ventilator before, I was hospitalized for a long period of time. And when I tell you that I had a bodily reaction, and I started that, that panicky feeling, and I became emotional. You want to know what I did? I straight up hugged myself. I was in my bed. I wrapped my arms around myself because no one was, there isn't anything in the world that could have stopped it in that moment. And I verbally out loud said, "You're having a trauma response. You're having a trauma response." Because that makes having a trauma response real. It removes this idea that Adria is losing it.
Right.
No, you're having a trauma response. And then I can hear my voice. I'm looking around. I can feel my palms on me. Okay. These are things that if my mom would be saying to me, "You're okay. So the first two were like really bad, to the point where I had to console. Cause here's the thing, like when you're really in the processing, it'd be like that. When you're not in the processing, you don't know what you feel, and you can't even greet it or know what it is.
Absolutely.
So it sounds extreme, but it's actually like the better part of processing, of like, oh, I was able to identify. Oh, I was able to self-soothe. And I got really good sleep that night. Great. So that's the first thing I'm doing, is catching it and speaking to myself. Good. The second time I had a moment, I had to journal. I had to write out what turbulence I was experiencing. So I just wrote until I couldn't write anymore. And that significantly helped me. And I know that journaling is helping a lot of people. A lot of people. And then the yoga. So like every time I'm coming to teach a class, I'm also coming to take class. So typically in the studio, I don't demo on my mat the whole class, right? Like I might demo a few things, but I'm really focused on my students. When I'm teaching here, I can't see anybody. So I get to actually and I have to do the whole practice so that they see what it looks like. So that has been a great gift. I've been practicing up to like 3 times a day. And that's just deep, like I'm deeply breathing in my yoga practice. That means I'm regulating 3 times a day, it at minimum once. And so those have been like, and then just doing whatever I want, eating, like we were talking about, eating a lot. Doing what I want, eating, wearing like my favorite dresses, around my house, like cooking. Yeah, a part of me, like, again, I tell my friends this, I'm like, this is how life should be, minus like the pandemic.
That's true.
Teach from the privacy of my own home, get to just like leisurely go about. So I've been coping, and I'm in my 3rd week of quarantine, and it's getting better. I'm getting better.
Absolutely. So I want to come back to and revisit just that night in your bed. Like, I feel that that's so powerful for you to speak to yourself, and also speak to like what your experience is at the time, and really acknowledge that, so you are aware, so you can take other steps like journaling, like meditating, because I understand that those are what we usually reach for, right? You should meditate, you should journal, you should do this. But if you don't have a root from which this is coming up.
How can you access it if you don't have that foundation?
Right. If you don't know what you're feeling, if you don't know that you're feeling grief or disappointment or sadness or even anger and frustration, I mean, like that's a usual response in this. If you can't step out of your house, or if you feel confined, even if it's logical, you might be angry.
Absolutely. Or like just reading the news alone and just seeing how things are being operated will make anyone pissed.
Right.
It has pissed me off several of times. And you know what? Like that moment, the first week in my bed, it took time to get the words out. Like it took time. I was in it for a minute, and I think that we just don't show up for ourselves in the ways, like, we actually have everything that we need. We absolutely, whether you're alone or you're not in this, you can get through this. Because I always talk about how the breath is like a natural anti-anxiety. If you breathe deep enough and for a long period of time, your central nervous system will regulate. It will come into a place that you can feel calm. This isn't like some hippy dippy, oh, breathe, let it go. No, it's science. It's
Shit.
science.
Yeah.
Like, that's all that it is. And also, having a trauma response is science. Something triggers you, your brain calculates it, it sends signals to the rest of your body reacts. This is all science. And we have the tools necessary to self regulate. Absolutely. But we're just not, we just unfortunately, we live in a capitalistic society that, it does limit us. As an instructor, how students are, it's like, I just don't have time. I believe them now.
Mhm.
I believe them. Now I'm like, because at the rate that people are practicing that, have been trying to come to the studio for so long, now they're online every day with me doing yoga. Yeah, I believe you, because you have to be at work at 9 a.m. and you don't
Absolutely.
get to come home until 5, then you're hungry and drained. I believe you. You're absolutely right.
Absolutely. And it's time and it's energy too.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, you can exert yourself for especially 8 hours all day. I mean, how much energy do you have left? Body, mind, spirit, how engaged are you? And I think
Exactly.
that's what's interesting about everybody pausing is there's a lot more engagement, you know? Like,
Exactly. Say that again. Say that again.
yeah.
That is such the truth.
Yeah.
There is.
So
There is.
there's some gold. There's some gold in it, but it's like you said, it's definitely covered with a lot of darkness, a lot of grief. I mean, a lot of people losing opportunities. Like
A
you,
lot of loss.
yeah, absolutely. So, for you, like you said, like I love how you're so playful about it. Like you're like, yeah, like I'm putting on my favorite dresses. Like I don't have anywhere to be, but like you feel good when you look good. When you know what I'm saying?
Yes. Now yes. Like, but for real.
When you eat good, we were talking about that. So, can you speak to that at all? Like just personally, what you're doing, obviously, like you said, dressing up and listening to music and things like that.
Yeah, so like again, like the first week and a half, I didn't do anything. Like I didn't do anything. I did my hair this week for the first time. So I mean, in doing my hair, I just been like letting it kind of do what it wants.
Mhm.
But I like was actually, let me actually do my hair. You were like, let's get on Zoom. I'm like, okay, let me put a little bit of stuff on my face. Those are all things that I love to do anyways, and I found myself like not doing them for that first week and a half because I was like still processing and
Mhm.
all the things. So yeah, I've just been obvious, like I love dresses and I'm like, okay, well no one's here. I can just wear whatever I want. I am going to this weekend I plan on like painting. I have painting supplies here, so I plan on doing that. I've just been doing the things that that spark joy.
Mhm.
If it doesn't spark joy, I'm not doing it. Like, even if it makes sense, like, even if it's like, you probably do this, like, I have a load of laundry I have to fold. I'm like, it's not sparking joy right now. So I'm not going to fold it.
Like,
No one's coming over here, so it doesn't matter.
true,
So
true. And
why?
sometimes the
Listen,
clothes are wrinkled. Like I'm not
I
going
know, it's
to
like,
clothes immediately.
it don't matter. Nothing matters. There's no rules. I'm looking around my house because I'm like, what else have I been doing? And I've been resting. I've been resting a lot, and I've been creating. So, like tomorrow, I'm attempting to do like this nationwide yoga practice. I don't fucking know. I was just like, my friend called me and she was like, "Girl, what do you have to lose? Let's just see what happens." So I'm just like, I'm just creating and that's really it. And resting and in prayer and and just taking care of myself. And like I told you, girl, I am eating, okay? Like, I'm a chef, okay? Let's just keep it 1,000. I made
What you're
ramen.
making.
I made ramen from scratch 2 times already.
Look.
Scratch, okay? I made like this vegan pasta. Last night I made like a flatbread. I'm just like, I've ate so many. I don't even eat cereal. I bought cereal and I ate it. I was like, what are you doing?
Let's be honest, we're all buying things we wouldn't normally buy.
I have bought things that I would not. You like, I'm cooking maybe like 3 to 4 times out of the week. Other than that, I'm eating out. You know, like I'm like you were saying, I'm single. There's not much, you know.
Absolutely.
Now it's like the amount of dishwashing.
It's off the chain. We have like 3 different types of chips at our house right now. Like we have a bunch of like just different things.
For what? For what? I have 3 bags of chips in there too. I'm like, and I'm not eating them. I don't know.
Just in case I might want them though.
Just in case.
Oh my goodness. That's too funny. So now we all know exactly who we would really want to be quarantined with. We bring it down for the chef up in the kitchen.
I will chef. We will do yoga. Yes. I have been cooking.
I love
it. Are you? But it is like it is like you said, there is gold in it. It has been a blessing to kind of just, you know, family FaceTime calls. Oh my God. They're more seamless. There's less tension. It's amazing. Like, it's amazing to me, and this might bounce back to the first question you asked me about having a chronic illness. I think like experiencing near death has given me introspection into how I'm a little more relaxed. Because for a minute I'm like, am I processing? And I am. I'm processing at a little faster rate. It's because I've been in this before, and I think people recognizing that, you know, tomorrow is not guaranteed, and we are all that we have. Like connecting as humans, like, and little do people know, like you and I have been following each other. This is our first time connecting like this, but you wouldn't even think it because you know, this is just like our default. And I think that the world is kind of having the default setting is going to change, like you know, going through the motions, you know, avoiding people, you know, complaining about people, like that's not going to be the default anymore. Like we are all we have. That is what's sustaining us right now, is each other.
Absolutely. I love that. That's beautiful. That's what's sustaining us right now is each other. I think that's just such a beautiful quote, you know, in so many ways. And somebody's not happy. Look. But yeah, so I do think that just like connecting with people is different because, you know, that issue you had with your family or whatever doesn't seem as serious. You know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't seem as serious. Like there's this you know, this covering of gratitude almost over all of us, you know, right now, like looking for the things that we're thankful for.
Yeah, that are right. Like I said, like gratitude is in the driver's seat right now. Gratitude is driving right now. Like so much to be grateful for, even when things aren't ideal. It's like so much to be grateful for, and just to have a fundamental understanding that like to be alive is unique. To be alive is a rarity.
Right.
Like 1 in a billion.
Right.
So and I think that at this time you're really seeing that for what it is, and it's important that we, you know, there's something circulating on Instagram that just is saying like, and this isn't the exact quote, but it's like the most disappointing part of this would be if we come out of this unchanged. And I wholeheartedly agree. Like I think this definitely awoke some things in some people, and others won't, and that's okay.
You know? It's a collective movement, right?
It's a collective
so it's
movement.
like, you know, this is just like the jolt that many people will need. And then and everybody matures and evolves differently. And that's like when we try to reach understanding even when we're like, come on, don't you get it? But then there's going to be other people and brothers and sisters that are brought along differently, and by their probably their own personal circumstances after this, you know. So I totally understand that. So I want you to kind of just tell us, what are some words or mantras that you use and live by yourself?
Ooh, I have like a whole little windowsill of them. Well, one, and this is not my quote. I don't know whose quote this is, but no one is you, and that is your power.
Mm,
That is one that I like. I have to keep in mind like all the time,
mhm,
um, because I have the tendency to think I have to shrink so that other people can feel how they need to feel. So no one is you, and that is your power. And then I have reminders in my phone, and one of them is the key to success is to do the very thing that you're afraid of a number of times and get successful experiences under you.
mm,
So that one helps me in a way of like taking risks, doing things that like the nationwide yoga practice. What the fuck? Like
I'm excited.
whatever. You know, it's like whatever. How will I know if I don't ever do it?
Absolutely.
You know, and what is failure? Because at the end of the day, if I do it enough, that's how I'll become successful. And then the last one that comes up in my phone is that it's unhealthy and toxic to put expectations on, you know, a person that you love. Or it's like no point in doing that basically. Like, and expectations, we know in a sense of like, I think it's especially important right now because we're in a global pandemic, but just expectations in a sense of like allowing people total freedom is love. So those are the ones that really stick with me that I think of probably every single day.
Absolutely. I think those are beautiful and so all encompassing, you know, for us to be able to connect with authentically other people, you know, we have to allow them the space to change. And it brings me back to something I saw on Instagram too. I swear that's, I mean, social media is where I see a lot of things, but just that you would allow a person that you love 100,000 deaths, you know, because ultimately we change, right? So there's parts of us that die and they don't seem to work anymore and they wither away, and there's parts of us that flourish and we keep around. And so just the idea of even like being in a committed or long-term relationship, which could be with a partner, but it could be with a friend, it could be with your mom, it could be with a lot of different
Yeah,
people, family. So it's just you allow them to
I
change.
love that. I
Yeah.
love
So
that. Yeah.
so can you tell us a little bit about how people could reach out, connect with you, offer support, or tune into your meditations and practices?
Yeah. So right now, all of my practices are located on Instagram at Adria Moses. My website, adriamoses.com. You could email me at yogabyadria@gmail.com. You can reach out for me as a resource if you need support, if you're looking for sessions, all the things. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Adria Moses, pretty much everywhere. Facebook too.
Yes.
I'm trying to get better at Facebook.
Well, sweet. I've really enjoyed following you and following along with meditations and yoga during this time. And I just think it's so rich what you're offering your community and nationally and globally. So y'all tune into that meditation tomorrow.
I appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, likewise.